So we're going to continue on with more query fun. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter task number 3 here. And I'm going to move my closing comment after that. And for this next query, we're going to be using the concatenation operator to create kind of a combination column. It's going to combine the contents of multiple columns and give it a different name as an alias. So we're still using our AP database. We still need to do a select. But this time it's going to be from the vendors table. So let me contract that and we'll expand vendors and columns. And we're going to say from vendors. That will be the end. And the tricky part is going to be our select. So we are going to create a contact name. And that is going to be the vendor contact F name, which is the first name. And if you get a little tooltip, I recommend double clicking on that. Then you don't have to worry about typos. We're going to be combining this. So we have to do a plus with the space. So that's just a single quote, a space, and a single quote. And then we're going to combine that. So we're going to add another plus with the last name. So that is vendor contact. And I'm going to double click on contact L name. So that's going to be our first column. And we're going to save that under an alias of contact name. Okay, so all of that is column 1. Now I'm going to put in a comma. Our second column is also going to be a combination of existing columns. And it's going to be an address. And we're going to start with city. So we're going to say vendor city plus, and we want a comma in the space. So we need to do a single quote, comma, space, single quote, plus. And now we're going to add in the state. So it is vendor state. And after vendor state, we need a space. So we're going to do a plus to concatenate, single quote, space, single quote. And then we're going to do a plus. And the last thing we're going to add to this is the zip code. So it's going to be vendor zip code. And all of that we are going to save under an alias. So we're going to use as, and we're going to call this thing address. Okay, so our first column is going to be contact name, and our second column is going to be address. And I'm going to put that in single quotes. It was displaying in blue, which is usually reserved for keywords. So putting it in single quotes just ensures that SQL Server Management Studio recognizes it as an alias in a column heading. So at this point, I've got my 2 columns, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you should be able to look through the results and see that it did combine the first and last contact names, and it did format our address correctly. So at this point, I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to move my little comment down. Now for the next one, we are also going to be using our vendors table. So I'm going to copy a portion of this, still in the AP database. And we're still going to do a select, and we're still getting it from vendors. For the select, we want the vendor city and the vendor state. which I have up here. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And you'll notice that I did insert a comma in between. And then I think we're going to order this as well. We'll order this by state. And then within vendor state, we're going to order this by vendor city. And let's go ahead and run this. And you will see a problem with our data. We have lots and lots of duplicates. So to eliminate the duplicates, we're going to modify this just a little bit. And we're going to change the select to the select distinct. And by adding that distinct keyword and running this, we get rid of all of the duplicates. So let us move our closing comment down. So we just completed a distinct query, and our next one is going to be a like query. So we're still using AP, but for this one, what we want is the vendor city. We're still using our vendors table. So we're going to say select vendor city, and that's the only column we want from vendors. And where we put the like, which looks for patterns, is on the where clause. So we have our where clause, and we want to look for a vendor city that begins with SAN. So we have to use like. And then in single quotes, this is where we're going to specify the pattern. Now we want cities that start with SAN, so we're going to key in SAN, and it does not matter what comes after. So we're going to put in a % sign. Okay, and then we're going to put in our closing quote. So the % sign represents multiple characters. And if you put it at the beginning, it means there can be lots of characters before SAN. And if you put it at the end, like we are, it means that it has to start with SAN and it does not matter what comes after. Okay, so that is our entire statement. So I'm going to close it off with a semicolon and I'm going to run it. And so you should notice that all of the cities that are displayed begin with SAN. And we used the %, so it does not matter what follows. So some of them have a space, some of them don't. We're going to do another pattern match query using like. So let's move our closing comment down and save. And for this one, we're going to be looking at names instead of cities. So we want to look at the contact last name, still using our vendor table. And for this one, we are going to be a little more particular. We want it to start with DAMI. It does not matter what the next letter is, but we want it to end with the letter N. So we're not going to be using percentages in this. So instead of using a %, we are going to put the letters that could occupy the position in brackets. So I'm going to just, for simplicity's sake here, I'm going to copy a portion of this. And instead of vendor city, we are now looking at the vendor contact last name. And so the condition or the filter is going to be vendor contact last name like. And then in single quotes, we're going to key in the first part. Okay, and it's the next letter that can vary. So in brackets, we are going to key in the letters that are allowed, which is an E or an O. And then the last letter has to be an N. Okay, so if you put letters in brackets, that means you have to pick one of the letters. So we're going to end this with a semicolon, and we're going to go ahead and run this. Okay, you can see that it found two names that matched. So at this point, we're going to move our little comment down and save our changes. So we're going to do one more like query. And for this one, we want the vendor name and the vendor zip code, but we only want 5-digit zip codes that begin with a 9 and end with a 1. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. We're still using AP, and this time we're going to select the vendor name and the vendor zip code. And that's going to be from vendors where vendor zip code like. So the first digit is a 9, and we know the last digit is a 1. There's 3 digits in between. Okay, we don't want anything larger than a 5-digit zip. So what we're going to do to represent the different digits is use an underscore. So we're going to put in 3 underscores. And then we're going to put in the number 1. Okay, now on the computer, it kind of looks like a solid line, but these are 3 separate underscores. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And I should only be looking at 5-digit zips that begin with 9 and end with 1. So at this point, we're going to move our closing. And we're going to save our changes, and we are done with this task.